super hot and I be feeling myself, yeah.
Wake up, it's time to get ready. Go out, it's time to get ready. Wake up, it's time to get ready. Time to get ready, time to get ready. Whoa. Wake up, it's time to get ready. Go out, it's time to get ready. Wake up, it's time to get ready. Time to get ready, time to get ready. Whoa. Up for another day, get out the bed.
Yo, what is poppin', everybody? Welcome back to the Off the Bench podcast. How you doing? So, major news in the world of the Knicks. It's going to be all Knicks-based this episode. First of all, thank you guys for listening. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, so you can stay notified on our next videos. And thank you, everyone who's listening on any platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Thank you guys so much for listening and tuning in with us. So, big news coming out of the NBA. Sir Donovan Mitchell is now he's reconsidering a lot of things nowadays. He's out here, well, first of all, his head coach, Quin Snyder, has now stepped down as the Utah head coach. He had 2 years left in his contract, and yet he looked at the roster, looked at the playoff performance Utah showed this year, and even last year to an extent, and it just, and everyone in the NBA knows this, anyone who watches the NBA knows this, something is not clicking in Utah. And when there was that dispute with Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, especially a couple years ago, Rudy Gobert taking light out of what was initial when COVID first was reported, and then Donovan Mitchell, his ensuing, just those rumors of him wanting to be elsewhere, and now Quin Snyder leaves, and the Lakers just hired a new head coach, so he's presumably just going to sit out this next basketball season and weigh his options until 2 years from now. But he's out. He's out of Utah. It's done. It's a done deal. He's not there. So that leaves Donovan Mitchell and Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN's recent report that Donovan Mitchell is now reconsidering his life, his choices, reconsidering looking at what the landscape is in terms of Utah, because quite frankly, Utah has peaked. They're going no further than probably the second round. By some miracle, they make it to Western Conference Finals, but clearly that has not been the case. This matchup pairing of Gobert and Mitchell has not worked at all. They've tried everything in their power. Danny Ainge too was brought in to try to fix this thing, and it's not working. So now Donovan Mitchell, knowing that a new head coach is going to come in, things probably aren't going to change. Now he's come out and pretty much said that I signed this extension with Utah with Quin Snyder in mind. Now with him gone, I'm reconsidering everything. So this is officially his out. If he wants to demand a trade from Utah, this is the perfect time to do so. And of course, the number one team Mitchell has been linked to for years was the New York Knicks, which is why we're here talking about Donovan Mitchell, is because the New York Knicks has been looking for that star player. And they had a disappointing year this year after finishing in the 4th seed in the 2020-2021 COVID-ridden year, where there was no fans, or fans came back in the playoffs, but it still didn't feel the same. The Knicks really took a step backwards, falling in the 12th spot. They couldn't even qualify for the play-in tournament. That's how bad of a season they had, for a myriad of reasons. But Donovan Mitchell now has that choice of saying he's got the green light to go up to management, go up to the fans and say, get me out of here. I do not want any part of what's going on. I don't want to rekindle a new thing with a brand new head coach. Get me out of here. give him like his top three places. Of course, the Knicks were just mentioned. The Heat are also involved because of they really the Heat were eliminated most not because of Jimmy Butler or Bam Adebayo's faults, but because of guys like Kyle Lowry that really didn't um, push them over the top as Pat Riley intended them to. So bringing in a guy like Donovan Mitchell would be uh, would push their efforts to possibly make a finals appearance. However, they really don't have much to offer. I mean, no one's going to pick up Kyle Lowry uh, in return for Donovan Mitchell, I don't think. Tyler Herro is their biggest piece, and then they can offer a bunch of draft picks. So Donovan Mitchell he's got that option. He's got that option to go to different places. There's teams obviously interested because if you're not interested in Donovan Mitchell, what the hell's wrong with you? He's a top guard in the league. And he plays defense. He scores. He can be your leading scorer, and he facilitates the ball very well. Um, so he has now the opportunity to pick and choose where he wants to go, demand the trade. Now Utah doesn't have to trade him. Okay, it's not like he has a no trade clause, nothing like that. Danny Ainge, who's a lifelong Celtic, would not, I don't think, consider trading him to the Knicks unless they get a huge package. Now, I've been talking to Knicks fans on Twitter, social media, on the phone, like a few friends of mine that are Knicks fans, and this is the conclusion I'm coming up with. Knicks fans want Donovan Mitchell really bad. The Knicks want Donovan Mitchell really badly. But what are you willing to give up? Now, a lot of people are saying, well, just trade, like, give him Randall and give him, like, Fournier. No, like, they're not. Just, in what world would an organization take a player who a year ago was the most improved player and then had a terrible year last year? Whatever reason Randall had a terrible year this year. But he was given that $114 million extension, and he's not lived up to it in his first year after signing it. He regressed after having a career year with the Knicks on a contract year, which is why those contract year performances in all sports, not just basketball. Look at Aaron Judge right now with the Yankees. He's performing out of his mind and is definitely going to demand upwards of $400 million, but this 1 year can't make up for the fact of the entirety, right? Sure, what have you done for me lately does come into effect, but really, just trying to get rid of Randall is not the ideal move. What the Knicks do have to consider, and I'm going to transition over to the Knicks, is just looking at their I'm just going to look at their next move and just say, hey, like, what are you guys doing? Is RJ Barrett your centerpiece? Because you've been doing all this stuff. We've been building around him. In the first year of Tom Thibodeau, they emphasized defense. RJ Barrett improved dramatically. He even improved dramatically this season, coming into his zone. He wanted to average at least 20 points per game. He did that. But now, for him to be... This is the example I gave the Knicks fans. Is that... Do you see RJ Barrett, if you're the New York Knicks, as your Jason Tatum? Because you look at Jason Tatum right now, the Boston Celtics have been through a myriad of different types of cultures and years when they drafted Jason Tatum. They went through these weird moments where they signed Gordon Hayward to that huge contract. They brought on Kyrie Irving, and then they also had Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, but it was just like, what's the deal here? They were trying to bring in different superstars, but at the end of the day, when Kyrie was was not playing in their playoff run when they made the Eastern Conference Finals, Jason Tatum was much younger, and it was only a few years ago. Jason Tatum really came into his own. And Boston said, that's our guy. We're going to build around this guy. Now, of course, R.J. Barrett last year, well, not last year, but in the 2020 COVID year, they really had a. R.J. didn't show up against the Hawks. And a lot of players didn't show up against the Hawks. What, and then, of course, the Knicks this past offseason decided to overcorrect. And they went for Kemba, Evan Fournier. A lot of fans were saying we should have gone for DeMar DeRozan, but looking at what the Spurs and what the Bulls, what the Bulls gave up to get DeMar DeRozan, and the Bulls are in another different kind of thing. But enough about the Bulls. The Knicks really overcorrected and went full offense this year. So going for a guy like Donovan Mitchell, you're gonna have to give up different pieces. And R.J. Barrett is, if I'm Danny Ainge and the Knicks are interested, give me R.J. Barrett, because I'm not about to go into this full rebuild. Because once you get rid of Donovan Mitchell, you're either gonna say, hey, we're gonna stick with Rudy Gobert, or we're gonna say, you know what, fire sale, everyone's on board. We want young players, we want draft picks, and we want matching salaries to be attached to those first round draft picks. They want a king's ransom, essentially, for both Mitchell and Gobert. So if I'm the Knicks, I'm going after Donovan Mitchell. You have to determine whether R.J. Barrett is an untouchable. Because if R.J. Barrett is untouchable, and you bring on and you're trying to do your best to bring on Donovan Mitchell, the Utah Jazz, I don't think are gonna budge on including R.J. Barrett. Obviously, with whatever veteran you have, whether that's Randall, Kemba Walker, Evan Fournier, make the salaries match, but that's a given. Kemba Walker, I think, will most likely be the guy that gets traded because he can attach a first round pick. Maybe you can attach Evan Fournier as well, although I would be wary to attach Evan Fournier because I think he had a pretty good year. He had an Evan Fournier type of year where he shot really well on some games he didn't shoot really well. Some games he played really good defense. I'm saying it's very up and down. But if you followed Evan Fournier throughout his career, this is what he's been doing in Orlando his entire career. So that's what you were gonna get. You weren't gonna get a 3-and-D wing guy out of Evan Fournier. You were gonna get a guy that has the ratchet three, can give you upwards of 30 points a game, or on any given game, not per game, any given game, 30 points. But at the end of the day, you can't revolve your offense around him, whereas R.J. Barrett, you can. Now, if you bring in Donovan Mitchell, let's say it's Kemba and Randall, right? Whatever. Attach a couple first-round picks. Okay, salaries match, boom, you got it. But that's the bare minimum, where you have vets with those large salaries that are team friendly but match up with what Donovan Mitchell has, or at least balance the sheets. You attach 2 first round picks, let's say, right? Okay, so now you're looking at the rest of your roster and you say, okay, who else can we attach? If RJ Barrett is truly a centerpiece that you want to build around, do you attach Emmanuel Quickly? Do you, you're going to have to, but you have to ask yourself if you're the Knicks. Emmanuel Quickly has to be on there. And then the question of, they need another young piece. So obviously, a trade that's been out there, R.J. Barrett and Emmanuel Quickly, Obi Toppin and Quickly would be good. I would think satisfy the Jazz, whereas they have two pieces, a guard and a forward, and then you throw in 2 first round picks, a veteran or 2 to match the salary, and that would be enough, I think, as a good offer for Donovan Mitchell. But again, you have to, if R.J. Barrett is your guy, you have to stay firm. Just because, and that's more of a direct message to James Dolan. Mostly because you cannot have another Carmelo Anthony trade, whereas You know this player is on the market, or you know he's going to be on the market. He's going to demand a trade at some point. And this guy right here, this guy right here, Donovan Mitchell. Um, it's you know this man is going to demand a trade at some point now that Quin Snyder is gone. You have to also determine whether you want to include Mitchell Robinson, or you want to deal him elsewhere and get like a guy like Clint Capella on here. And that's the thing. If you're the Knicks, you have to determine whether RJ Barrett is that guy. Because if he is not that guy, if the last 2 years, Tom Thibodeau, his coaching staff, Worldwide Wes, Scott Perry, the entire Knicks brass comes up to James Dolan and says, you know what, this RJ Barrett thing was cute and all, but we need to move him to get Donovan Mitchell. If I'm James Dolan, I can't approve that. I mean, I know he probably would because it's James Dolan, but you get rid of RJ Barrett, then you're left with, like, you can't have Quickly and Mitchell starting if he doesn't get moved. So if the price is too much, and the price being too much is inclusion of RJ Barrett, then it's like, okay, we understand that Donovan Mitchell is a hugely talented point guard, but we cannot afford to lose our homegrown star, right? Well, where else do you look? Because if Donovan Mitchell isn't available to you because of the demands of what a Utah Jazz and Danny Ainge are asking, where else could you go? I mean, it's simple. It really is. You should really just go elsewhere, looking at the Knicks as a whole, because for decades now, the Knicks have needed a point guard. And they've always associated the point guard with a superstar, right? A superstar point, Chris Paul, Stephon Marbury. But really, that you don't need a star, right? Look at what the Celtics have done. The Celtics have accumulated a ton of draft picks to try to get a trade going for a superstar. They haven't. Sure, they had Kyrie, but they never won a chip with Kyrie. They got Gordon Hayward. They didn't win a chip with Gordon Hayward. With the homegrown pieces that the Boston Celtics have bled through and said, you know what, we're just going to stick this out. We may miss the playoffs. We may make the playoffs. We may not go far, but at least we have these young guys with this coaching staff that we trust to develop them. And then we can move forward. I mean, Brad Stevens didn't automatically become a number one coach. I mean, he throughout the season, he showed that he became a coach. When he got hired, it was just like, all right, whatever. I mean, you guys recall. But what the Knicks should do, if they can't get Donovan Mitchell, is get a lower tier point guard. Get a guy like Tyus Jones. And try to call Dallas. I know he's not going to come cheap now because of how his performance was in the playoffs. But Jalen Brunson can fit really well with the Knicks. He can fit really well. He facilitates the ball, and when asked upon, he can go for 40. He can go for 40. And Jalen Brunson also had the added bonus of playing next to Luka. So he learned a lot from Luka Doncic. So the Knicks have that capability to trade for a point guard. It's just, do you want to sell the farm for Donovan Mitchell? And if James Dolan says, and I know Worldwide West, Scott Perry, all of them, they're doing their due diligence. A lot of course, it's New York, so a lot of media are going after them, going after Tom Thibodeau. And before the season, I believe I had a preview. This Knicks team that finished 37-45 finished exactly how they should have, 37-45, where they were in it until the very end. They were playing meaningful games in April and in late March and April. But when it came time to the playoffs, they were like just a few games behind. So it is what it is, dude. That's like that was the Knicks that was supposed to these 37-45 Knicks that finished this past season should have been the same Knicks from the season before, where they finished in the 4th seed. The difference with the team that finished as the 4th seed is that they had players that played a lot more defense, so a lot of low scoring affairs led to a lot of wins. But in this new season, you had Kemba Walker, who, yes, he can score on occasion, but he can't play defense. Evan Fournier, just talked about him, shoots a ratchet three. His defense is on and off. And Julius Randle just got the payday, so he's not feeling that pressure anymore of having to perform for not only the Knicks, but for the rest of the NBA, which is why he's being brought up in trade talks. And sure, Obi Toppin had great games in the last couple of games of the season. So did Emmanuel Quickly. He had 2 triple-doubles. The problem is, one, a lot of those teams rested their starters. Now, just because they rested their starters and play their bench, the bottom tier of their bench, does not mean that, they're playing against bums, because you're in the NBA. But you're not playing the big stars, the big name players, the players that will guard you and make sure you don't get a triple-double, that you don't go off for 30 Obi Toppin. So that small sample size is not enough, I don't think. And a lot of fans were saying, you see, Obi Toppin should have been starting over Julius Randle. Emmanuel Quickly should have been our starting point guard, which the Emmanuel Quickly being the starting point guard is something that the Knicks have to consider too in terms of the Donovan Mitchell trade. Because if Donovan Mitchell does come in, or any point guard for that matter, if you believe you already have a starting caliber point guard in Emmanuel Quickly, then you don't trade for any point. I don't care. It doesn't matter if it's Donovan Mitchell, Jalen Brunson, Tyus Jones. If you believe Emmanuel Quickly can take you over the top, he's shown you enough in the last couple of games with his 2 triple-doubles that he can run this offense and run it to the extent where the Knicks can win games, then just go for it and try to find another 6-man in free agency or in the draft. Have a young bench, or just try to sign a 6-man of the not a 6-man of the year, hopefully a 6-man of the year, but try to get a guy in free agency that can be your 6-man, so Emmanuel Quickly can step in, or just say, you know what, Kemba, you're going to be our 6-man. You're gonna be coming off the bench. We're still gonna pay you all this money until we can find a suitable trade partner. Because at the end of the day, that's the questions you have to ask if you're the Knicks. The Knicks can't. In my point of view, and I'm just a guy recording in his little studio office. I don't think the Knicks should sell the farm, because we saw that, and we saw how badly that affected the team, where you had Carmelo Anthony, you had Amari Stoudemire, and then you had no one else. And I believe the team had Raymond Felton, Danilo Gallinari. They had I'm trying to think of the power forward or the forward. I can't remember his name, but he was a 3-and-D guy. And then they had David Lee, who they traded. And it was just, they traded a lot of guys to Denver, where for a while the Knicks couldn't even beat their own homegrown talented team with Carmelo Anthony. The Knicks, I believe, were winless against Denver since the Carmelo Anthony trade, until Carmelo Anthony got traded. The Knicks hadn't beaten Denver, or at least I don't think. And that's because they traded the entire farm. The point guard, Raymond Felton, was having a pretty good year, but not the spectacular, amazing year that New York Knicks fans expect from every single player on their starting 5. Because this isn't 2K, this is real life, ladies and gentlemen. So that whole notion of trying to give everything up to get the star player cannot fly in this front office. Whether James Dolan is like, hey, he's going on the Michael K show saying, hey, I know some guys that want to come here, a.k.a. Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and then have that blow up in your face. And it's like, okay, come on, dude. Do better. And looking at, and the thing I would tell James Dolan as well, if I'm Worldwide Wes, if I'm Scott Perry's, like, look at the team you also own that plays in Madison Square Garden. The New York Rangers are on the verge of a possible Stanley Cup appearance against the Tampa Bay Lightning. And the Tampa Bay Lightning are on a 2-year run where they've made, I believe, two of the last 3 Stanley Cup appearances, and they won one of the Stanley Cup Finals. They're on the verge of a dynasty there, and the Rangers are about to stop that dynasty, or they have the possibility of stopping that dynasty. So you have to look at it from that perspective. Like, look what happens when you let whatever, and the Rangers, mind you, they had the number 1 overall pick last season, and they got Copa. They got number 1 overall pick last year, got the best player in the draft, and now they're in the Eastern Conference Finals. Like, let your basketball people do what they have to do. You just saw when you let them do what they do, you get the number 4 seed, you get playoff basketball back in New York. Let them do what they do. Do not do not let them overcorrect, but let them overcorrect. Let them make those mistakes, and then see how they do. See these contracts out, because I know not just James Donovan, but any owner must be sick and tired of paying for people that don't work there anymore. James Donovan has fired new coach upon coach upon coach who has signed 4 5-year deals and haven't seen it through. Keep it going. You guys are right there. Sure, would Donovan Mitchell put you over the top? Of course. All the eyes would be on the Knicks. The Knicks would be everyone's dark horse in the playoffs. But just let them figure it out, because there is a chance the Knicks do not get Donovan Mitchell. And James Dolan cannot freak out if they don't get Donovan Mitchell, because there is a high chance they don't get him. He could either stay in Utah, and Utah says, you know what, fuck you guys, fuck you Donovan, fuck you Ruby, we're going to go with a different coach, and you guys are going to get a new sound, and we're just going to give this one more college try. Or they could say, you know what, fine, we'll trade you, but we're going to trade you to places you don't want to go. Like Chris Paul going to Oklahoma City. He's like, hey, you want to get out of Houston? Good luck. Get the fuck out of here. Essentially, Utah has no. This is all pure speculation on what Donovan wants, what the reports from Adrian Wojnarowski say, from what all the rumors have been saying. But at the end of the day, Utah could just say, fuck you. We're not fulfilling any of your fans' needs. We're going to trade them somewhere else. They could even send Rudy Gobert to the Los Angeles Lakers for chump change and still say, you know what, Donovan, we're not going to trade you to the Knicks, because I'm Danny Ainge, I play for the Celtics, and I'll be damned if I help the Knicks do anything. But at the end of the day, the Knicks are still in it once again. And I know there was that report earlier months ago or weeks ago that Damian Lillard was turned off by the Knicks regime because they had a bad year. And it's not that... and I laughed when I saw it. It's like, well, dude, like, your team just traded off C.J. McCollum, tried to tank, and failed at tanking, and now they're trying to get Zach LaVine. They're trying to get, like, random dudes to pair up with you. Like, you demand the trade, guy. Like, just say, look, like, this... That's a whole different story for a different day. At the end of the day, the Knicks... And for the YouTube viewers that can see the screen, these two guys up there, it's a picture of R.J. Barrett and Mitchell Robinson. The Knicks have to decide who is the centerpiece and who's the centerpiece and who is expendable at this point. Because Mitchell Robinson is another guy we didn't talk about. Mitchell Robinson, tremendously great defense. Love the highlights of him getting alley-oops, but he gets injured a lot. Now, that is reminiscent, and I bring him up, of a Greg Oden, who has all the talent when he's healthy. It's like, holy cow, who can stop him in the paint? And then he would always get hurt. So Mitchell Robinson is coming up for a contract extension. The Knicks could deal him in a sign and trade for a guy like Clint Capella, which would be a lot easier pill to swallow than moving R.J. Barrett. But you still need that point guard. But you have to determine whether you want to keep Mitchell Robinson. This is the point. The point I'm trying to make is that the Knicks have to determine whether Mitchell Robinson stays in New York or if he's expendable and we can move him and we're just going to build around R.J. Barrett and get a big man that can stay healthy and get an average I don't know, 12 and 8, I guess. 12 points, 8 rebounds, or 12 points, 7 rebounds. Hell, go after DeMarcus Cousins. Go after DeMarcus Cousins. Go after Boogie Cousins. Go after somebody. But you have to determine whether R.J. Barrett's a centerpiece, whether R.J. Barrett and Mitch are the centerpieces, and though they're untouchable, that's what you have to determine. Because at the end of the day, you're the New York Knicks. You just missed the playoffs. You had an offseason of overcorrections last year. This is not the time to freak out, panic, and trade the farm for Donovan Mitchell because you want to win the headlines, because you want to be on the front page of any New York news media outlet. You don't want to satisfy the Stephen A. Smiths of the world, because you have bigger things to fry. Look at the New York Rangers. You ever wonder that? This is what boggles my mind about Stephen A. Smith. Always talking about how New York sports deserves better, but the New York Rangers are out here, pretty much being the better seed of the Tampa Bay Lightning, who's on the verge of a dynasty. And I cannot stress that enough, that the Tampa Bay Lightning are on the verge of a dynasty. And Stephen A. Smith continues to talk trash about the Knicks, continues to talk about how bad the Knicks are run, how badly they're done, how much hurt they've done them over the years, and how New York deserves a lot better, but New York has the Rangers. And it's like, if the Rangers win the Stanley Cup, I guarantee you the parade will go bananas. Bananas. There will not be you will not be able to drive, you will not be able to walk, you will not be able to do anything. From the subway stations to the streets of New York, that you cannot walk. Everyone's going to be going crazy if the Rangers win the Stanley Cup. You don't hear a peep out of Stephen A. Smith. Oh, well, he's a basketball. No. They have this guy covering UFC. The fuck does Stephen A. Smith know about UFC? That's just something that I want to get off my chest. Point is, the Knicks have decisions to make. That is what they need to consider. I would love, as a Knicks fan, for Donovan Mitchell to come in. But at what cost? At what cost? And that's what the Knicks have to think about. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. If you like our videos, like and subscribe on YouTube. If you love what you're listening to right now, make sure you follow us and keep up to date with our podcast. Thank you so much. My name's Jorge. Thank you for listening to the Off the Bench podcast.